In this week's episode, we talk about the lack of healthy masculine role models and how this absence leads to confusion about how to embody their masculine energy. We talk about aliveness, and for many men, sex becomes the only domain where they feel allowed to fully experience and express themselves. And we talk about the importance of community, brotherhood, and safe spaces. Welcome to Man Quest Define Meaning, where we help men navigate modern life, find their true purpose, and redefine manhood. I'm your host, James, and each week, inspiring guests share their journeys of overcoming fear, embracing vulnerability, and finding success. From experts to everyday heroes, get practical advice and powerful insights. Struggling with career, relationships, or personal growth? We've got you covered. Join us on Man Quest to Find Meaning. Now, let's dive in. I believe that male sexuality is good and beautiful, and we need more men showing up with full masculine potency. Good morning, Gayatri. Can you explain more?
Oh, thank you, James. So I think we're at a time in our culture and society where there's a tremendous demonization of men and masculinity. And I see this playing out for a lot of men in a kind of confusion about how to really show up in a man, a deep sense of shame around what it is to be a man. And then people within that tend to go to either extreme. Either they're like following hyper kind of macho, masculine stereotypes, or they've become kind of a bit floppy and sensitive and ineffectual, and not appealing to women. And so there's a huge amount of confusion. But in my experience, having worked with men for 13 years now in the field of sexuality, is that when a man gets to discover who he really is in a space that's dedicated to bringing his authentic self, then he rises into his masculinity and gets to express this in a way that feels beautiful and aligned, and has a potency and an aliveness to it that we really need in the world right now. I think the problem is not that there's too much masculinity. I think, in fact, that we don't have enough. We don't have enough models of what a really healthy, full spectrum expressed masculinity could look like. And men are struggling because of that.
I never really had them role models in my life. And it's this idea that I kind of swung more to the nicey-nicey kind of person. So I would be in relationships and I would allow that woman to literally walk all over me. And I would be anxious and a little bit suppressive around her because I didn't want to upset her. And so that energy was very, 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 very kept in. I wouldn't allow myself to release it. And so there would be that occasion where I might go and drink or something might happen. And then suddenly all that anger and rage, which was kept inside myself, would suddenly come out and go bang. And there's nothing I could do about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally recognize this place. Yeah.
It's this idea that, there's two extremes. But again, we need more role models, more people who are more set in how to be a healthy man, how to be both masculine and feminine, to be able to take action, to be able to go out and have boundaries, but also at the same time to allow themselves to surrender, to express their emotions, to be able to really step into that, the idea of the four archetypes, the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover.
Yeah, absolutely. And we still live, many boys are still brought up with a lot of conditioning, which is, it's both kind of covert and obvious, the message boys don't cry, but it's also subtle and kind of seeps into one's being about how it is to be a boy or what it is to be a girl. And for many boys, the message that they get from very, very early on is it's not acceptable to express emotion. Yeah. Or the only kind of emotion that is really socially sanctioned as a boy is anger, is being able to, kind of come out fighting a bit, even if you get told off for it. But at the same time, there's a kind of approval that you're strong and you can stand up for yourself. So the boys get very, very confusing messages around this. But it's like the sense of aliveness that comes in the fluidity that we all need in having emotional expression gets very, very constricted at a very early age in boys. And so this is one of the reasons, I think, why men get so kind of hooked on sex as a form of expression. Because sex is one of the few places where it's okay for a man to feel something. Yeah. And even culturally, we have this sort of connection between sex and violence. So it's like you can have a fight or you can fuck, but you can't really do anything else.
Yeah.
And it's like when I say this stuff, even surely not. Surely we've evolved more. Surely we give men permission for a wider range of expression. But the reality for many men is not. Yeah. So there's two places where you're allowed to actually feel something. And if you don't want to fight, then you put all of that into sex. And it's natural for anybody, but, for men and the masculine to want to see the aliveness that comes through sexuality. It's like we're wired for life, for more aliveness, to fully express ourselves in this existence. But if you don't get many opportunities to do that, if you're in a job that doesn't feel purposeful and, it's kind of, you're numbed out, you don't have much of a social life that excites or enlivens you, you can't really see where life is going that feels meaningful to you, then the seeking of aliveness tends to come in the very narrow aperture of sex. Yeah. And so this is one of the places where many, many men get kind of really stuck on sex as the only place where they can be.
So that's powerful. Before we jump in with all that aliveness and stuff, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I call myself an erotic mystic. And I use these words because although we talk about sex and sexuality, I do find that people very often, as soon as they hear that word sex, they put the idea of what it is into a very, very small, very, very narrow, very, very limited box of how it looks, how it's done, who does what to whom. And that's not what I'm interested in. That's not what I'm here for. So I speak about Eros. And Eros I describe as the energy of existence expressing itself through you as aliveness. Now, we're in springtime, and this is an incredible moment to look out into nature and to see Eros in action, right? Because there's this sense of life just bursting through everywhere. It's the leaves on the trees, it's the flowers bursting forth from the ground, there's this riot of colour and vibrancy. The birds are tweeting madly everywhere. The bunnies are chasing one another around the field. It's like after winter, everything in nature springs into action. And it's full expression Eros here. Yeah. So that's just to give people a flavour of that. And I use this word mystic because I am really interested in and oriented to and love to take people on a journey into the mystery of this world. And the mystery is something that we've become very cut off from, especially in Western culture. And this is a relatively new thing. Only a few hundred years ago, people lived in a much more intimate relationship with the mystery. But we have this idea that we've become very cultured and very civilized and very rational and scientific. And the downside of that is that we tend to have lost a sense of awe and wonder at what is beyond us, what is bigger than us. And I feel that sex is an incredible gateway into the mystery when we drop the script about how we do it and actually move forward with a sense of awe and wonder. So this is part of what I initiate men into, is giving them an experience where they get to connect with their innocence and to create a relationship with the mystery of it all. And some people might be listening and thinking, oh God, that sounds really out there or a little bit woo-woo. But I think actually, if you stop and just really give yourself a moment, there is a part of you that can probably resonate with the truth of this. Because so many people are moving through life thinking, there must be more to this than I'm experiencing. There just must be more to it. And I think the more exists in the mystery. That's what we're longing for. That's what we're seeking. We want to go beyond what we already know and who we think we already are. There's a calling in us for it. And when we don't know where to look for it, life feels kind of dull. Life feels kind of meaningless. Life feels just a little bit like, So there is a part of every single one of us, I believe, that knows that more is possible and just doesn't necessarily know where to look for it.
Yeah, I think that's, from my own perspective, what I've noticed is that if I do the same routine, the same stuff all the time, I get bored. And within boredom comes the idea of distraction of sex, porn, or that kind of stuff. But what I've noticed is the more that you explore that mystery, the more that you go out and do something a little bit different, it's that sense of exploring, that sense of excitement, that sense of really, I almost feel like you're stepping into like a storybook.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And, and in fact, we can even be doing what looks like the same thing on the external, but if we approach it with an attitude of, I am experiencing this for the very first time, then it brings an attitude of curiosity into our being. So one of the biggest problems around sex for most people, diving back into my favourite topic again, is that they tend to think they know how it should be done, and how it should go. And so any sense of curiosity around, well, what's truly alive in this moment? What's here? What do I even want in this moment is lost. Or how do I relate to this person in front of me as if for the first time, rather than just, now we do this, then we do this, then we do that. Oh, and that's what sex is, right? That's the script. And that's what becomes dull, boring, flat, unfulfilling. But actually, in some ways, it's not like you need to change sex itself. You need to change the way you're stepping into it and having an attitude of curiosity and slowing down can completely transform everything already.
I was just thinking, there's this idea of when we have this idea of sex, I think for a lot of people, including women, it's more goal-led. Their purpose for sex is or two things: either to have a child or to have pleasure. But it's more or less, you do the deed, you finish off, you're done. I think there's this idea of being able to, as you said, slow down and explore that, and to explore each other, to explore what different sensations can you feel. I'm working with Graham, was it Waterfield? I think it is Graham Waterfield on his course. And so he's teaching us to explore self-masturbation, so like a penis massage, but rather than it being the idea of just ejaculation, there's none of that, but there's the idea of feeling the sensations of the touch and all that kind of stuff. But from that comes the idea of sexual energy. And you can feel when you've done 20, 30 minutes of it, suddenly your whole body is starting to vibrate because you're able to send that energy up and almost surround yourself with sexual energy, which gives you that vitality.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And, it's a great tragedy that so few people actually have been initiated into this kind of experience. So few people know the potential that's available to them within their sexual energy. It's like it's already here, right in your body. You don't need expensive equipment. You don't need to go out anywhere else to do it. It's like it's all happening in here. But we do need that shift inside and some knowledge and skill about how to do it differently. And the problem is that many people, we have this idea that sex is natural. And on one level, on a simple biological level, of course, sex is natural. And the species wouldn't be here without it. We'd just go extinct. Yeah. But most people don't have sex for procreation. They have it for a whole bunch of other reasons. In fact, last week I was on a webinar with a group of men, and I asked them, why do you have sex? What does it mean to you? And it was so touching how many of them said connection. Right. It's like, I want to connect. I want to bond. I want to feel one with, and these were not like super spiritual guys. They were like, everyday guys just saying like, I want to feel that special feeling that you can only have when you're really connected to another human being. Yeah. So the tragedy is that most people go around sex in a very biologically based way, putting climax, orgasm as the focal point of it, and actually missing the slowing down, the savoring that would bring true pleasure and connection. Yeah. And so especially for men, because there's so much pressure put on men to perform, to have an erection, ejaculation is somehow the marker of successful sex, that when that story is running, it's very difficult for a man to really step back and choose something else unless he's actively cultivated the capacity to do it differently. It's great to hear that you're doing Graham's work. I totally rate him and what he brings. And I would say we probably have very similar kind of perspectives when it comes to the beauty of masculinity and male sexual energy when men have learned how to bring this in a really integrated way.
Yeah, what's your story?
Thank you. So it took me a long time, actually, to move into sexuality work, even though I felt a real calling to it for most of my adult life. So, in fact, when I was younger, I was very sexually adventurous, and I wanted to know myself and I wanted to know other people. And some people might say promiscuous, but that's a judgmental label. There was just this desire in me to really express. Well, interestingly, I mean, so many women, I hear like their stories of just very unfulfilling and boring sex and everything like that. And it was just never my experience. I had incredible adventures. And men would often say to me, wow, you're so uninhibited, or I've had experiences with you like I've never had with anybody else. And I would just think, oh, what is everybody else doing? Because it came so naturally to me. And I already had a very energetic quality to my lovemaking. And over the years, something which happened, kind of again and again, was that sometimes I would be drawn to make love to a man, even though I wasn't really attracted to him on the usual kind of physical or even emotional level. I would just feel this kind of inner impulse to move towards them. And afterwards, they would often tell me, oh, wow, I've been really struggling with erections. Like, since my girlfriend dumped me 2 years ago, I haven't been able to get an erection. But with you, it just changed. Or they struggled with premature ejaculation all the time. And then suddenly they moved into a different kind of energy and it wasn't a problem for them. And so I was like, wow, I seem to be healing men through having sex with them. And it felt like a gift that I had, but I really didn't know what to do with that, because it's like, well, if I had sex for money, that would make me a prostitute. And it doesn't feel like, kind of my idea of who I am. But I was with that for a long time. And then in 2012, after having done quite a number, I'd done a lot of trainings in body work, energy work, healing work, and that took me into the path of Tantra. And I'd been in my spiritual practice already for a long time. Like, I've been a meditator for about 30 years. And finally, I was like, I'm going to take the plunge and I'm going to become a sex worker. Like, I've been thinking about this for such a long time. I'm just going to step through that door and see what's there for me. And actually, one of the rules that I made for myself at that time was, if I feel like my heart is hardening towards men through this work, I will stop immediately. Because I'd always loved men and loved being around masculinity. And I had this idea that being a sex worker and the transactional nature of that work would bring me into kind of like the worst of the worst, and then I might start getting really fed up with men. And then I was like, okay, well, I would have to stop if I did that. And that, it was completely the opposite, actually. What I got through a year and a half of being a sex worker was actually just such a tremendous compassion for men and the male experience. Because the men who came to me really showed me their vulnerability. Like, they showed me a part of themselves, which I feel like probably no other human got to see. And it really deeply, deeply touched me. And I heard their stories and I heard their challenges and frustrations and confusions. And I mean, very often the sessions wouldn't actually involve sex. We would lie cuddling and talking, and they would say, wow, I've never been able to have a conversation like this with a woman before. Yeah. Or I would massage them and touch them, and they'd say, wow, I've never been touched like this in my whole life. Like, just please carry on touching me, After a year and a half, I got into a relationship. So I changed the boundaries of my work. And in fact, I have been celibate for the last 8 years. So I feel like an incredibly erotic and alive woman, but my sexuality is very focused into my work, actually, my vocation, my calling, rather than relationship. So it's a real shift. But that's the evolution we go through in our life, right? Like, who we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it's not the same. But I've stayed working with men and stayed with this just great, love and compassion for men, and a desire to really support them into coming into fulfillment within themselves, because I think the world needs it. And women are crying out for it as well. Women are crying out for men who like can just really show up in their full, authentic, vulnerable, and potent selves.
You mentioned a minute ago about the parts that, so when you spend time with a man, you mentioned the parts and the challenges and experiences that men go through.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest challenges that they go through?
Well, so, mostly we were talking about, intimacy and sex. And I think one of the things which I encountered again and again was how much men really wanted to give to women, particularly in pleasure, how much they wanted to be able to like offer themselves in pleasure, but felt that they were not received in that. And then that they hit a wall and just didn't know what to do with it. And it was like they had this gift in them, but they had nobody to give it to. Yeah.
Okay. So for men out there who are perhaps in the exact same position you just said, what can they do? How can they start to create space around that so that they can start to give, they can start to receive, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. I think, one of the most important things is like this desire to give, to express our love, to connect with another. It's a completely human and natural experience. The challenge I see for many men is that they tend to put all of that focus onto one person, usually a woman, and they want to put it all outwards. And they've never cultivated it inwards towards themselves first. Like they've never learned how to give that to themselves. So there's a kind of emptiness or hunger that also comes with it, which is very off-putting to the feminine. And also, many men have never shared that gift of love with other men. And I don't mean in a sexual way. I mean in a bonding and brotherhood way. It's like one of the main recommendations that I make to men who like want to expand in touch and be lovers is like go and develop platonic places of connection where it, and particularly with other men, like go to a cuddle party where it's not about attraction and desire, but actually about contact. Go to a men's circle and hug some other guys and like learn to get comfortable with contact from other men. And that can be an edge for some men. There's no doubt about it. They've been brought up with distrust and separation and competition or just lack of contact. But it's one of the ways where a man can then reduce the kind of hypersexualization that tends to come with touch and desire and contact and just relax more into experience as well as getting nourished from it. Yeah.
The funny thing was, I recorded a podcast yesterday, and you're talking about fatherhood and how, as a single dad, having a daughter, there was this idea that sometimes you can put all your energy into looking after your kids, and same with family, but then you never bring it back to yourself. And so you're saying the key to looking after kids, looking after whoever, is to first fill yourself up.
Yes.
Then
exactly.
Once you are full, you can then give it to anybody else. So there needs to be a key theme rolling through.
Yeah, exactly. And then the love that we want to express, it comes as an overflowing from our being rather than trying to fill an emptiness that's there. Yeah. And people can feel the difference of that in some way. It's like when it comes from an overflowing, it's easier to receive. If it comes from emptiness and grasping, that creates a dynamic on an energetic level that can be very off-putting.
So this will be linked to aliveness then. So if men want to experience more aliveness, is it about really filling themselves up first?
I think it's an important aspect of it, that because aliveness begets more aliveness. Yeah. And it's like, sometimes we have to overcome inertia in order to do that. It's like, oh, I don't want to go out for a walk. But then you go out for a walk and your body gets moving, the blood gets pumping, and it's like, oh, that was great, and you come back and you're like, I'm so happy I did that. Yeah. Or you don't want to go to the gym, but you overcome it and you get there. And it's like, and then once we've done that, we feel we're more in our bodies. We also feel more accomplished, just even on a small level. And that kind of boosts us to want to do more of that. Whereas if we're kind of really numbed out and floppy and not doing anything, and then we're seeking that aliveness again coming through sex, it's kind of like, oh, like what? Don't put all of that need on me. It's like, find it in yourself first, right? And then bring that to me. Then we've got something that we can play with here. Yeah. So I definitely think the more we cultivate our own aliveness, the more we have to share with another.
Yeah. I think it's very much linked to grief as well. I think grief has a big part. So I've had my fair share of grief in years gone by. But what I find sometimes is that grief can almost numb the heart and disconnect yourself from the world. So for those people who perhaps are disconnected or numb, how can they start to step into their aliveness and to step into grief a little bit more?
Yeah, so, thank you for bringing in grief, because it is one of the streams of my work. And I feel there's a very intimate relationship between grief and Eros. And I would say numbness can be an element of grief, but it's usually when we're blocking the grief that we go numb, right?
Okay.
It's when we're restricting the flow of grief, we go numb. When we're resisting how grief wants to move through us, we go numb. And when we block one emotion, it tends to block the other emotions also. Like, we don't have very good filters in our system. So when we close down in one area, it tends to shut down the other. And so if we're not able to express the more complex emotions like grief, which can be both sorrow and sadness and anger and rage and disappointment, and it's like grief is a very complex kind cluster of different emotions and sensations. It's not just one thing. But in the culture that we live in, people are terribly, terribly afraid of expressing grief. Yeah. Even most people won't allow tears to come out. It's like they're not even, it's like 1% of grief, let alone 100%. It's like a tear comes and they say, I'm sorry, or they just haven't cried. Like, I've worked with men, they haven't cried for 10, 15, 20 years. This is not natural. This is not human. Our tears are part of our system's process of coming into balance, into homeostasis. Our tears have hormones in them which heal and soothe. So they are necessary. So if you can't cry, some part of you has got shut down, and usually at a very early age. So, for a lot of men, when, like, particularly in the teen years, I would say there's usually a point where a man has a rejection. It's like maybe a first love scenario, and it hurts so much, yet he has no way of expressing that hurt. It's not given space. It's not given time. He's not guided through how to be with that. So he shuts down in his heart. He armors the heart and closes it down. And at the same time, when that closure of the heart happens to be, it's a bit like building a dam inside you, and everything just gets backed up behind the dam. Yeah. And then it just gets full of rubbish and clogged up. But because we're not in touch with the like subtle what's going on inside part of us, we just then start to move through the world thinking, well, this is me, this is who I am, this is it. Yeah. But it's not. So much more is possible for you. And I would say, for any man who like really wants to move into his full potential of aliveness, of his erotic expression, of his sexual potency, at some point on that journey, you need to meet the grief that's inside you, that's blocking you from being able to really feel as fully as you have the capacity to feel.
So how, as a man and a woman, how can we start to feel our grief more?
Well, I would say not to start with grief, probably.
Okay.
And so first of all, I just want to mention one piece that feels really, really important, because when I mention the word grief, when we speak of grief, most people immediately go to bereavement in their heads, right? Grief and death sort of go together for many people. But there are many, many other kinds of grief that we experience through life. Some of them are around loss. So, loss of relationship or loss of the dream that we had for something in our life, loss of work, loss of purpose, loss of the plans that we made. And if you look at, 5 years ago when we were in lockdown with COVID, the pandemic, there were a tremendous amount of losses that many people experienced. And yet I don't think we really digested all of that. I feel a lot of that is still sitting in the collective court, But, even beyond that, I would say there's kind of existential grief that many, many people are experiencing. And my understanding of this comes from the work of Francis Weller. So I want to honour him in that. And he wrote an amazing book called The Wild Edge of Sorrow. And one of the griefs, he actually talks about 5 different gateways of grief, but one that feels really, really, I think, resonant is the grief we experience of what our soul came into the world expecting, but didn't receive. And I think for many of us, it's like our soul came into this world expecting a village to surround us, expecting a tribe to hold us, expecting connection and celebration and knowing our place in the web of life, of having initiation and markers of our journey, our passage through this life, of having elders who could show us the way. And all of these structures that our ancestors would have known only a few hundred years ago have been really systematically dismantled through the Industrial Revolution, right? And so, but yet there's part of us that knows it and seeks it. And this is why people, we're trying to find connections through social media. We're making gods out of celebrities. It's like there's a part of us that longs for these symbols and signs and meaning making in our lives. And when we don't already have that in our childhood and we're not brought up with a connection to something bigger than us, we fill that space and often with things that are unhealthy and unhelpful. Yeah. So to truly connect with grief, I would say we need 2 things. And one of them is community. And the other is ceremony, that it needs to be in a space of ritual. And so this is part of the work that I do when I'm teaching at festivals and events. I actually run grief rituals so that people get to be held in that level of to truly step into grief. Yeah. So I appreciate that. And there are other grief spaces that are online, that are smaller circles, and I'm only speaking of the work that I do. But what I would encourage people to do that is accessible from where they are right now is like, don't try to think of grief because it will feel overwhelming. It will be like, oh, if I start, it will never end. That's most people's biggest fear about grief. If I start, it'll never stop. And when it's not tended to, well, that I can't say, but it may even be true. So that's okay. But I think what's more accessible is starting to simply turn into yourself and to notice what is here now. So this is a practice I teach my clients, and it can really help if you put your hand on your heart and close your eyes and just check in with yourself and say, what is here now? And then see what floats up from inside you. Yeah. Don't try to think about it with your head, because your head will probably judge and criticize or try and edit it or try and talk you into something else. Oh no, you should be feeling da 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 da. That's the way we've been brought up. Like actually just turning into yourself, your heart, and saying, what's here?
Yeah. I can feel sadness.
Right. Like
Yeah.
literally when people get the space to actually be with themselves, usually grief and sadness, some kind of sadness, some kind of melancholy is just right under the surface. Scratch the surface, grief will be there.
Yeah, it's like for me. It's like sadness of past relationships gone by. I've never really struggled to heal a lot of the wounds, and there's a sense of loss. Loss is a big one, but not necessarily loss of partners. It could be loss of dogs, loss of people in your life, loss of it could be anything, and it's this. I could feel myself slightly tearing up earlier, but I've always been a man. I've always been a man that struggled to cry, and I might be able to tear up for like 30 to 45 seconds, and then suddenly it stops, and I'm like, "Come on, let it flow." But I mean, sometimes you put so much pressure on yourself to grieve that you almost block the way.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And when there's that kind of like, I don't know, sense of expectation, right? It stops us. Expectation is the enemy of experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, start with something smaller, just taking that time. And, and if you're listening to this and you do it and you're like, I'm not getting anything, it's okay. Keep going with it. Like maybe put a reminder on your phone, like every hour of your waking day, just to do that. And in time, it will come. It will come when you actually just give yourself the space to feel, to notice what is already happening inside you, right? We're not generating this feeling. We're simply cultivating our capacity to notice it in that moment, which does sometimes amplify the feeling. So sadness was there. Oh, I'm attending to sadness. Wow, now it's starting to come through my eyes in the form of tears. But the thing is, it was already there inside you. There was a part of you unconsciously that was already holding it back. And when we're holding it back, we're suppressing ourselves from fully experiencing life, right? At a very unconscious level, of course. This is just what we've been taught since we were very, very little to do. But then it becomes like a kind of veil between you and the beauty of the world around. So when we actually give ourselves permission to feel whatever we're feeling without judging it, we start to have more capacity to be in an intimate relationship with the world around us.
So you're saying that quite often we block ourselves.
Yeah.
How can we start to unblock? Because I know that I think how I've been brought up in some respects on the farms and different areas, you're being told that, not to cry, or you see parents with children who are having a paddy and they say, stop doing that. And it's almost like you're trying to push it down. And it is feeding that, I think, as a society, we are afraid of what's going to happen if we are allowed or allow kids or allow other people to express ourselves, there's almost this for me, is this fear that if they express themselves, they're going to make a fool of me. They're going to shout and have a paddy, or they're going to start getting angry. But I feel as though these are the parts of ourselves that we need to be expressed. Perhaps maybe there's a way and a means in which we can express it in a certain situation. So maybe in the middle of a shop, you're not going to get angry. And so you'll find another place.
Yeah.
But I feel as though we need to be able to express all these emotions. So how can we get over the idea of blocking ourselves, and how can we start to release these emotions, whether it's grief, anger, sadness, whatever it is, healthily?
Yeah. So what's really important in turning towards all of these emotions is a sense of containment, right? So it's creating basically safe structures and moments where we get to be in the energy of the feeling without it being directed like towards somebody or being harmful. And I would say if we practice this stuff whenever we're in a neutral or good state of beingness anyway, it gives us something to refer back to whenever we're really activated or heightened. Yeah. So to give an example, and I'm thinking, I've never done this with kids actually, because I work with adults, but I imagine this could be quite good. But so one of the practices which I teach men and couples as well, is how to do some play fighting. So it's like they take turns. One person is holding in their physicality and the other is pushing into them and bringing the energy of their like out. Yeah. But you don't start doing it when you're angry. You do it when you're feeling good. Yes. And you get the feeling of, okay, your Ra is coming towards me, but I can stay here and be present with you. I'm going to hold you. I'm going to witness you in your Ra. And you get a feeling of like how much strength you can bring in, how much power you can let through. And you do it in a way that's playful. So it's not like coming with a charge to it. It's not coming to hurt. It's like, let's meet one another in this energy. And you swap it around. And, you each, so for couples, especially, you each take turns. Now, what is fascinating in this is that men are much more reluctant to bring their Ra to a woman than a woman is to a man. And that's because so many men have stuffed down that part of themselves. They're afraid of it. They don't want to hurt the woman. And so they've disowned, they've rejected their beast, But actually, most women love the energy of beast when it comes in a healthy way. You're laughing, this one. It's like being able to meet one another in that place. But when we're in a warm, playful, spirit, it means that, so often couples get into arguments with one another and they try to communicate through talking, right? But they can't hear one another, and then they start shouting because they're trying to get through to one another, and it just becomes a big mess. What is so much better is just like, I've got this feeling, there's this feeling here. Will you hold me while I bring this feeling through? And do it without words. Let it come as an energy. Let yourself roar while you're held by your partner. And usually once somebody's done that for a few minutes, they can then talk about what has upset them in a really normal, natural, neutral way. Or they discover, I don't even need to talk about it now. It's like, because what I needed was to know that you were there for me. I needed you to be with me in this difficult feeling. And when we bring it through the body and we're met in the body, it can transform it. Yeah. And we don't need to be afraid of it because we've already practiced it and we know what we can hold for one another.
Yeah, that's takes the charge away.
Mm, exactly. And we don't need to fear one another's emotions. We can learn how to be with them, but we need to practice this stuff. It's like we weren't taught it growing up. We never saw it modeled anywhere. People are just discovering how to do it. But when we practice it together, we build more relationality, and then we can expand together in our intimacy.
Yeah. There's a couple of things I've seen recently. So I saw not an article, somebody on Facebook put it down about him witnessing two men fighting. And
Yep.
he asked the two men why they're fighting.
Yeah.
And he said that I don't know what the reasons were, but what he said to them, right, he said that you can fight, but there's a couple of ground rules that you're going to have.
Oh, and yeah, I saw this too.
I think that's key, I think, because we get into this idea that fighting is bad. But fighting, if it's got a purpose and it's there and it can help us to release anger, but there's boundaries,
yes,
then I think that's a good thing. Because it allows us, especially as us as men who are able to release anger, we're able to release it in a healthy way. And I think that's why I noticed a lot of men who are into the personal development are big into martial arts. And I think that's the same reason. It's not to defend themselves, it's so that they can allow that inner warrior to get to have a voice.
Yeah. And what's so beautiful in martial arts is that, you spoke right at the beginning about this, the fluidity of being able to be with the masculine and feminine parts. And in martial arts, this is the yang and the yin and the flow between them. And yeah, I've worked with many men actually who martial arts was their first gateway into, this thing we call energy, like a sense of, there's this mysterious force that moves through me and life that I can tap into through my martial arts practice, that I've come to know through that practice. And so in the martial artist, he's powerful, he's potent, but he's also yielding and flowing. And for me, this is the integration, when we bring these two parts together. Because without the yin, a man who's just exploring the masculine, he becomes very brittle, actually. This is the problem with kind of hyper-masculinity, is it's very brittle. And it's very easily pushed into unhealthy expressions of aggression because it doesn't have that fluidity to move with what is happening. It only knows force.
Yeah. Just before we cover that a little bit more, I saw another thing on Facebook where there's a couple and the man was just sitting there while his partner, I assume it's his partner, she was allowing that inner feminine to come out. There's just going rah kind of thing. And I think that for me, that showed how in a really, really healthy relationship, having that space where both the woman and the man can voice their expressions.
Yes.
And that was a lovely thing to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, actually women have become much more, kind of enjoying bringing that kind of energy forward and giving themselves permission to do it. It's been part of women claiming their empowerment. I would say it's not, like anything, it can have a healthy and an unhealthy expression, but I find it quite fascinating. I remember years ago going to a workshop where the facilitator, he had all the men lined up on one side and he had the women lined up on another. And he was like, men, I want you to, bring to the women your signs of like all your hurt, all your anger and feminine and everything. And they just kind of went, wah, 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 like that. It was absolutely pathetic. And then to the women, bring your rage. And the women went full Halle blown, and it just didn't stop. Like, it just kept going and going and going. And the guys, you could see them, they looked absolutely terrified, actually. But it was kind of fascinating because the men just couldn't access that part of themselves, and they couldn't bring it. And I think now men, like, that's part of the piece of work for men, is actually being able to reclaim that part of themselves, but bringing it through in healthy, appropriate channels so they can start to really feel themselves again and open into a wider range of expression.
Well, it's the idea. I think sometimes as a man, you were scared of that energy, because that energy can be so potency. So how can we stop ourselves from going into the unhealthy? So going from expressing anger to, how can we stop ourselves from going from anger to rage?
So I think it's interesting. It's like, it's not about stopping yourself from going into it. It's about having other expressions for your aliveness so that it doesn't get bottled up. Yeah, it's the bottling up, it's the suppression, it's the blocking of it that means that when the pressure builds up to a certain intensity, it does come out, like full blown, basically, because it's been waiting for so long to do that. Yeah. But it's realizing that if we have a wider range of expressions, if we bring our energy out in different ways, and that can be as simple as, exercise, for example. It's like, to not underestimate the power of moving our bodies in being able to regulate our emotional state. So it might not come in the obvious place, but I think, it's like, if you put everything into one very narrow channel, it's got nowhere to go out. But if you widen the channel, then it gets to flow in the space in between. And that's the kind of orientation I think men need to look at, is how to widen the aperture of aliveness so that they are more fully expressed in themselves, and that the anger and our need to state our boundaries, to give our nose, comes in an appropriate way, as does their joy and their heartfulness and their tenderness and their tears and their excitement and delight and and all the other emotions. It's like opening that range of emotion means it doesn't all get bottled up.
Thank you very much, Gayatri. Can you tell people what you are offering and how they can get in contact?
Thank you. So, I work with men who want to explore full spectrum sexuality. So this is connecting with your sexual energy beyond biology and bringing it into every aspect of your being, including awakening your consciousness. So I have an online program for men. I'm right in that at the moment, but there'll be a new round in autumn. It's called Initiation. So it's giving men the guidance around their sexual energy that they never had before. And I also work in person with men, specifically erotic mastery for evolutionary men. So this is about men who want to become the best that they can be in the bedroom and beyond.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.